Welcome to a demonstration of the value of sampling. This is a familiar file to you, at least this part over here. You've used this when trying to figure out when to do a tire warranty. I now want to build on that with the idea of what if I can't have what we call reality. Reality being, of course, I know what happened to every tire. In this case, 500 tires, yeah, we probably would be able to track down all 500. But suppose these tires, we're talking about what a Goodrich or one of the other real tire companies would sell. They're going to sell tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of tires. And so tracking all of those tires is not realistic. In a situation like that, what you'll probably do is have a sample. Now, maybe it's people who come back for repairs. Maybe you have coupons for a sample of people. In any case, the point is that you track the tires that you possibly can. So when you have a sample, the idea is that you get what's realistic. Whatever method you have for collecting a sample means that you will occasionally get the sample or consistently get the sample or randomly get the sample. Random selection or random sampling is considered the best approach because, of course, a random sample is not going to introduce any consistent or regular systematic bias. So how do we get a random sample here? We do it mathematically because we already have all the information here. And so I'm going to double click, and this is one method I've come up with for getting a random sample out of a list of information. It uses the choose function, which basically means I can set some sort of reference here as to which, it's called the index number, like which value do I want. So if I look here, the index number, if it's set to 1, it will pick up value 1. If the index number becomes 2, it will take value 2. If the index number is set to 3, then it will take the third, and so on, however many values you set inside of your choose. And of course, then what you want to do is manipulate this to give you different choices at different times. So instead of one set constant here, I've introduced a rand between. And this rand between says between 1 and 4. So sometimes it'll pick a 1, sometimes it'll pick a 2, sometimes a 3, sometimes a 4, and it will choose one of those integers randomly. So what I'm going to do with that then is if it produces a 1, if this rand between produces a 1, that feeds to the choose, and that 1 then means it will go here. Well, what does that give you? In this case, I have empty quotes, so it will give you a blank. The same if it chooses a 2, and the same if it chooses a 4. But in one of the 4 cases, it produces a result that goes and gets the tire number. That's when it randomly chooses to sample it. So that is going to change if you have seen rand between. If you haven't, go back and watch the video. But the idea then is that when rand between hits a 3, which will be randomly, then we take the tire as a sample. Now, that's blank right now. What's over here? Well, what's over here then is the actual information I want, which is the kilometers. So if this is sampled, if tire 1 is taken as a sample, then of course a 1 will appear here. And if the 1 appears here, then A3 would equal C3 because it would be a 1 here and a 1 here. If they are equal, that means I'm taking the sample and it will go and get the value of the kilometers. So if this is chosen, then it will go and get the kilometers, so it'll fill that in as well. Otherwise, it'll leave it blank. So if you want, if we press escape here, I can take those two values, because these are blanks. This is old data that I had here, but let's take a fresh sample. So let's go down, and because it's only 500 rows, we're good to copy this down. Okay, I skipped to this in the video, but here we are now. I've done the fill handle all the way down, and I will let it go, and you will now see that it changes. These are the ones that are selected, and I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Actually, I think I'll go over here and take a ride to the top, go end, arrow up. I could also use Control Home. And then here you'll see it does the choose, and in fact, watch what happens if I do recalculate. So if I'm going to hit F9 for recalculate, you'll see that it changes the sample that I get each time. So once I have a sample that I want to use, I need to kind of stop the process. So I'm going to go and I am going to highlight C and D. I'm going to do copy, and then in here I will just paste values. I don't want to change any of my formatting, so I will click on paste values, and of course then the formulas are removed and I have my actual values for samples. Before we can go any farther, we are going to need to bring these all together. So I am going to use the Control End feature. I hold down the Control key and the Shift key, and I press End. Now it wants to go all the way over to wherever I have something in M. Now, I'm still holding down my Shift key. I let go of Control. So with just the Shift key down, I use my left arrow key. I'm arrowing back over so that it only has selected my sample data from the top to the bottom. So again, I used Shift with Control End from my first position at the top, and that took me to the bottom of my active spreadsheet, including all the way over to M. And then with the Shift key still held down to keep the selection process going on, I move back over using my arrow key. So now that I have that, I can click on Sort and do a custom sort. You see how it's all selected here. I don't have headers because I didn't include this. And in here I am going to, I can just sort on either column, but let's go on column C. Okay. So what we now have is we have all of the values at the top here, and we're going to modify our table. Our table, this data selection is including a bunch of stuff we don't need anymore. So let's change our data source to just the active sample data. So I'm going to go down, whoops, there we go, back up. Those are my samples. So now my sample data for my pivot is just that. And what I want, you'll see here it still says kilometer and count of, I believe, of kilometers. So let's go back up to the top and see what this looks like. So now we have 2 where we used to have 4, and they start at 35. There's nothing in the first range. So I need to match these up. I'm going to take this and I am going to copy the whole thing. And I know I don't have any in the first row, so I'm going to take this here and I am going to paste, and then I'll have to move it around. So this one's in the right place. This one is, let's see, down, 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 105, 115, 125. Okay, I guess I did get a match. So now this becomes the word total. And you say, well, wait a minute, no, these are in the wrong column. Yeah, well, I just put this here to make sure that I matched it up. I can actually go here now, highlight it, and right click and press delete and shift cells left. Oh, it doesn't want to do that because of the pivot table. All right, well then, in other words, the pivot table is here and it's distraught about that. So the other way to do it, of course, is to simply move those over and say OK. All right, so this is a 0. And now let's take and create our formula for the sum equals sum. And we want to sum this colon to that. And we'll come back here to this first one and we will make it have dollar signs. And go here. And we, of course, divide it by the total, which is locked using F4. Enter. We can take our formatting from here because it is, of course, set up correctly. And let's go down. So now, in our sample data, if we want to stop at the place where it keeps our commitment to below 10%, this one hits 11% here. So let's say we want to stop before we get into the range where we go over 10%. So then this is where we would do it. So let's use a slightly different color here. And what do we find? Interestingly enough, the sample prediction is exactly the same as the prediction here. So this is our first evaluation of our sample. Our sample, if you look at the total, is only 126. Let's take this formatting and put it over here. Our sample is only 126. So if you take and go equals that divided by this, you'll see that that's 25%. So with only 25% of the data, we were able to very accurately predict what reality would be in terms of our decision making. Remember, this is all about decision making. So it is important to understand that you can, if you do the sampling well, you can use a sample to represent reality. And when you get into full bore statistics, which you will if you haven't already, you will see that there are some very bright people that have spent a long time in a lot of situations trying to figure out both mathematically and practically how large a sample you need under various circumstances in order to get a decent picture or a fairly clear picture of what reality would be. This is, of course, what you will end up calling inferential statistics. Let's take one other look at this. If I scroll down, you will see that I have a scatter chart. And in this scatter chart, I have the data from here. Actually, it's from here. And this has given me a kind of a picture of the profile for my results from here. So why don't we add the sample values? Actually, it'd be these samples. We'll use the same outline or the same grouping, and we'll bring these numbers in and see how the sample pattern represents or comes against the real one. So I'm sorry, I gotta scroll down here. The chart is selected, and in here under design, I'm going to select data, and I'm going to add a new series. Let's zoom up now, and that series is going to be the sample. The X values are still here, and the Y, delete what's there, the Y values are going to be the actual numbers. Okay. Okay. So let's go see what happens. So here, isn't that interesting how the pattern of the sample, it's not exactly the same. You see a difference here in reality. But overall, the pattern is the same in the sample as it is in the reality. So you get a sense here of what we are doing in statistics when we take a sample. And of course, it's important that your sample be as realistic, if you will, or representative as possible. And as I mentioned earlier, randomization is very helpful with that. So that's our little lesson on samples.